I'll give you $1 if you serve me in Italian. The words hung in the air of Le Ciel, Manhattan's most exclusive French restaurant. The man's silver Rolex glinted under crystal chandeliers as he smirked at the waitress, his entourage of suited men chuckling on cue. Lucia kept her face neutral, years of practice hiding the fire that threatened to erupt. The restaurant had fallen silent, other patrons pretending not to watch the spectacle unfolding between the notorious mafia boss and the slender brunette balancing a tray of Chateau Margaux 1982. Giovanni Battaglia was infamous in New York's high society, ruthless in business, cruel in pleasure. His recent acquisition of 3 struggling waterfront properties had made headlines, as had the mysterious disappearance of their previous owner. Cold dread washed over Lucia as Battaglia's dark eyes assessed her, his mouth twisted in amusement. The job at Le Ciel barely covered her father's mounting medical bills, and she couldn't afford to lose it, no matter how badly she wanted to pour the $800 wine over his immaculate suit. "Sir, I'll be happy to take your order whenever you're ready," she replied evenly, the practiced smile never reaching her eyes. Behind her professional mask, she calculated exit routes, noting the positions of his 4 bodyguards stationed around the exclusive corner table. The mafia boss leaned forward, manicured fingers drumming on the pristine tablecloth. $1 million. Cash. Just serve me in perfect Italian. His eyes flickered with something dangerous, something testing. "Unless you're just another pretty American girl playing dress-up in a fancy restaurant." Lucia's heart hammered against her ribs as memories of her childhood in Naples flooded back. Her grandmother's kitchen, the smell of fresh basil, hiding in wine cellars while men with guns searched their family villa. The life she'd spent years running from was suddenly catching up in the most unexpected way. "Va bene, signor Battaglia. Sarei lieto di servirvi in italiano," she responded, her accent flawless, voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. "Posso suggerire il tartufo bianco con risotto come primo piatto? È particolarmente eccellente stasera." His eyebrows shot up, champagne glass frozen halfway to his lips. The smug smile vanished, replaced by genuine surprise that quickly transformed into calculating interest. His companions shifted uncomfortably, hands instinctively moving toward concealed weapons. "Where did you learn to speak like that?" Battaglia demanded, all pretense of the game gone. He studied her face with new intensity, as though seeing her for the first time. "That's not textbook Italian. That's Neapolitan dialect. Southern coast." Lucia smiled tightly, mind racing through lies and truths, trying to find the safest path forward. "My grandmother was from Naples. She raised me after my parents died." A partial truth, safer than admitting her father was still alive, hidden away in a private facility in Queens. Chef Pierre appeared at her elbow, a lifeline in the dangerous waters she was suddenly navigating. "Lucia, table 7 needs attention," he murmured, eyes darting nervously between her and the notorious mobster. The message was clear. Get away while you can. "Your grandmother taught you well," Battaglia said, ignoring the chef completely. He pulled out a business card, scrawling something on the back before holding it out to her. "Come to this address tomorrow at 8. We'll discuss your $1 million. 2 of Battaglia's men watched her for the remainder of her shift, never ordering, never speaking. They left generous tips for drinks they didn't touch, eyes tracking her every move until closing. Lucia's fingers trembled as she counted her tips, the business card burning in her pocket like a live coal. The night air bit at her cheeks as she exited through the back door, keys clutched between her fingers as a makeshift weapon. The black Cadillac idling across the street made her freeze, its tinted windows revealing nothing of who waited inside. This was no random encounter. Battaglia had known exactly who she was. Lucia's apartment was small but meticulously organized, a stark contrast to the chaos of her thoughts. She pulled out the worn wooden box hidden beneath her bed, fingers tracing the carved initials, AC, before entering the combination that revealed her other life. The passport inside bore her real name, Lucia Catalano, daughter of Adriano Catalano, once consigliere to the most powerful family in Naples, before he testified and disappeared into witness protection. The $1 million offer wasn't about her Italian. It was a trap. Her father's condition was deteriorating, the experimental treatments draining every cent she earned. The doctors gave him 6 months without the new procedure, a procedure that cost exactly $1 million. Battaglia's offer wasn't just tempting. It was the answer to desperate prayers. The burner phone at the bottom of the box had one number programmed into it. Lucia hesitated before dialing, knowing once she made this call, there would be no turning back. "Agent Dawson? It's Nightingale." I've been compromised. The FBI safe house was cold and impersonal. Nothing like the home they'd left behind 7 years ago. Agent Dawson pushed a file across the table, his expression grim. Giovanni Battaglia isn't just any mafia boss. He's suspected of running the largest money laundering operation on the East Coast. I don't understand, Lucia said, staring at the surveillance photos of Battaglia exiting the same restaurant where she'd worked for 3 years. Why now? If he knew who I was, why wait all this time to approach me? Dawson slid another photo across the table, her father being wheeled into his weekly treatment. Ice flooded Lucia's veins as she realized the extent of their vulnerability. He's using your father as leverage. The question is, what does he want from Adriano Catalano's daughter? He's offering exactly what we need, Lucia whispered, the weight of the impossible choice crushing her chest. $1 million, the exact amount for Dad's treatment. The coincidence was too perfect, too calculated to be anything but deliberate manipulation. Agent Dawson leaned forward, his voice low and urgent. This could be our chance to finally build a case against Battaglia. We've been trying to infiltrate his organization for years. His eyes met hers, the unspoken request hanging between them like a guillotine blade. You want me to accept his offer, Lucia stated flatly, the realization dawning with horrifying clarity. You want me to walk into the lion's den and spy on one of the most dangerous men in New York. The thought made her stomach churn with equal parts fear and strange exhilaration. With proper training and surveillance, yes, Dawson confirmed, sliding a thin metallic object across the table. This looks like a normal earring but contains a microphone and GPS tracker. You'll never be alone. His confidence did little to calm the storm raging inside her. Dawn was breaking over the city when Lucia made her decision, the first rays of sunlight illuminating the choices before her. Play it safe and watch her father die, or dance with the devil, and maybe, just maybe, save both of them. She slipped the earring into her lobe, the weight of it nothing compared to the burden of her choice. The address on Battaglia's card led to a nondescript building in Little Italy, its ordinary facade betraying nothing of what waited inside. Lucia straightened her shoulders and stepped through the door, crossing a threshold that would forever divide her life into before and after. The Nightingale arrives. Battaglia greeted her from behind an ornate desk, using the code name only the FBI and her father should have known. His smile was all predator as he gestured to the chair across from him. We have much to discuss about your father's legacy. My father is dead, Lucia lied smoothly, the weeks of FBI coaching guiding her response. Her hands remained steady as she accepted the espresso offered by a silent attendant. I'm not sure what legacy you're referring to. Battaglia's laugh was genuine, eyes crinkling at the corners in a way that momentarily transformed his face from menacing to almost charming. Your father's not dead, Piccola Bugiarda. He's in the private wing of St. Mary's in Queens, receiving treatment for progressive supranuclear palsy. The detailed knowledge of her father's condition sent a chill down Lucia's spine, but she maintained her composure. What do you want from me? She asked directly, abandoning pretense. The Italian challenge was just theater. You knew who I was the moment I walked into Le Ciel. Smart girl. Battaglia nodded approvingly, sliding a folder across the polished mahogany. Your father had something that belongs to my family. Ledgers containing 30 years of business transactions. Before he betrayed us, he hid them somewhere only a Catalano could find. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. The $1 million offer, the timing, the surveillance. You've been watching me, waiting for my father to get desperate enough that I'd do anything for money. The realization made her feel naked, exposed in ways surveillance photos couldn't capture. Battaglia rose, moving to a painting on the wall, a landscape of the Amalfi Coast that struck a painful chord of homesickness in Lucia's chest. The offer stands, but with conditions. Find the ledgers, bring them to me, and you'll have your $1 million and my word that your father will remain comfortable. And if I refuse? Lucia asked, already knowing the answer but needing to hear it spoken aloud. The threat would make perfect evidence for Dawson's investigation, the earring capturing every damning word. Instead of answering, Battaglia pressed a button on his desk. The door opened to reveal a man Lucia recognized with a jolt of horror. Agent Dawson, his FBI credentials in hand. Your friend here has been on my payroll for years. Did you really think the federal government cared about 2 Italian immigrants? Dawson wouldn't meet her eyes as he placed a small device on the desk, her tracking earring, now removed and useless. I'm sorry, Lucia. Some games are bigger than you understand. The betrayal cut deeper than fear, leaving her truly alone in the heart of enemy territory. You have 3 days, Battaglia stated calmly, as though discussing a business deadline rather than her father's life. Find the ledgers, or we'll relocate Adriano to a facility where his care might be less attentive. The $1 million is still yours if you deliver. Lucia's mind raced through options, each more desperate than the last. The FBI was compromised, her father vulnerable, and the only lifeline offered was from the very predator she'd been taught to fear. I'll need access to my father. The clues could be in his personal effects. Granted, with supervision. Battaglia agreed too easily, confirming her suspicion that he'd anticipated her every move in this deadly chess game. Pietro will accompany you. Consider him both your bodyguard and your shadow until our business concludes. Pietro stepped forward from the corner of the room where he'd been standing so still. Lucia hadn't noticed him. His face was impassive, but his eyes held an unexpected depth, suggesting there was more to this enforcer than blind loyalty to Battaglia. The decision crystallized in Lucia's mind. She would find the ledgers, but not for Battaglia. Whatever secrets they contained had been worth protecting at the cost of their family's safety. Her father had sacrificed everything to keep them hidden. She wouldn't undo his life's work for any price. St. Mary's private wing gleamed with wealth, a stark contrast to the public hospital floors Lucia had frequented as a child. Pietro walked 2 steps behind her, his presence both reassuring and suffocating as they approached her father's room, his gun concealed but ever present beneath his tailored jacket. Adriano Catalano was a shadow of the powerful man who once commanded respect with a single glance. His frail body seemed to disappear into the hospital bed, skin translucent under harsh fluorescence, eyes cloudy but still alert enough to widen with fear. When he saw his daughter accompanied by a Battaglia soldier, "It's okay, Papa," Lucia soothed, taking his trembling hand while her mind frantically searched for a way to communicate without alerting Pietro. The disease had stolen her father's voice, but not his mind, his gaze still sharp behind the prison of his failing body. Lucia busied herself arranging flowers, positioning the vase deliberately on his nightstand. "Remember when we planted roses at our summer house?" she asked casually, referencing a property that didn't exist. "Near that old olive grove where you buried Mom's favorite necklace for safekeeping." A flicker of understanding crossed Adriano's face, his fingers twitching in a subtle gesture toward the book on his nightstand. The Divine Comedy, dog-eared and worn from repeated readings. Pietro's attention momentarily diverted to his buzzing phone, giving Lucia precious seconds to slip the book into her purse. The hospital visit yielded more than just the book. It provided Lucia her first glimpse into the hierarchy of Battaglia's organization. 3 different men called Pietro for updates, each conversation revealing layers of command and control that might prove useful if she survived long enough to exploit them. Battaglia's compound in the Hamptons was their next destination, a sprawling estate protected by walls, guards, and the illusion of legitimacy. "The annual charity gala," Pietro explained as he escorted her through security checkpoints. "Every important family will be here tonight. You'll be introduced as Battaglia's cultural consultant." The ballroom sparkled with wealth and danger, diamond necklaces adorning the throats of women who knew better than to ask questions about their husbands' business dealings. Lucia's simple black dress felt like armor as she navigated the crowd, cataloging faces, names, and connections she might leverage later. "My dear," Battaglia appeared at her elbow, possessive hand at the small of her back, as he guided her toward an elderly man whose weathered face bore the map of Sicily in its creases. "Meet Don Carmine Ferraro, an old friend of your father's. He's been eager to meet Adriano's daughter." Ferraro's rheumy eyes assessed her with unsettling familiarity. "You have your mother's beauty," he mused, taking her hand, "and hopefully your father's sense of loyalty," before he forgot where his allegiances should lie. The threat beneath the observation was unmistakable. The evening unfolded like a masterclass in mafia politics. Alliances formed over champagne, territories negotiated during friendly embraces, and vendettas marked by subtle snubs. Lucia absorbed everything, building a mental map of power dynamics that might offer escape routes from her impossible situation. "The Colombians arrive tomorrow," a young lieutenant murmured to Battaglia, unaware of Lucia's ability to read lips as she pretended to admire a nearby ice sculpture. "Everything set for the exchange at the warehouse. 20 million in product, clean transfer through customs." The book burned in Lucia's purse as she smiled and nodded at appropriate intervals, playing her role while mentally translating her father's clues. The Divine Comedy, Inferno, Purgatorio, Paradiso, circles within circles, a map through hell itself. If the ledgers contained what she suspected, They were worth far more than $1 million to everyone in this room. Batalia's private study beckoned when the party thinned, his invitation impossible to refuse. Maps of New York's waterfront properties lined the walls, red markings highlighting recent acquisitions. "Your father understood the value of patience," he remarked, pouring aged whiskey into crystal glasses. 7 years I've waited for those ledgers. They're the key to everything you see around you. Pietro's loyalty showed its first crack as he escorted her to her designated guest room, his voice dropping to a whisper outside Batalia's surveillance network. "Whatever you're planning, be careful." The last person who crossed him disappeared for weeks before washing up in pieces along the Hudson. The warning came with no promise of help, but the acknowledgement of her danger felt like the first honest exchange since this nightmare began. Night shrouded the Hamptons' estate in false tranquility as Lucia carefully extracted the Divine Comedy from her purse. Beneath the lamplight, her father's annotations became visible. Tiny numbers inked beside specific lines, coordinates disguised as literary appreciation spanning years of devoted reading. Dawn found her exhausted but triumphant, the pattern clear. Not just ledgers, but evidence of systematic corruption reaching into the highest levels of state government. The treasure wasn't buried in any summer house, but hidden within the city's oldest library, encoded in the Dante collection her father had donated years before his testimony. The warehouse coordinates from the lieutenant's conversation matched a location marked in her father's code, the final piece of a puzzle that had cost her family everything. Whatever exchange happening with the Colombians connected directly to what her father had hidden, explaining Batalia's urgency after years of patient waiting. Pietro arrived with coffee and a carefully neutral expression. "Battaglia wants to see progress today," he informed her, eyes scanning the room for evidence of her night's work. She had already returned the book to her purse, the critical information committed to memory. The Metropolitan Library stood like a temple of knowledge in the morning light, its marble steps leading to potential salvation or doom. Pietro remained close as they entered the special collections room, his discomfort among scholarly pursuits evident in his restless hands and shifting gaze. "We're looking for a first edition Dante, donated by Professor Alberto Conti," Lucia explained to the librarian, using her father's academic pseudonym. The elderly woman nodded knowingly, retrieving white gloves before leading them to a climate-controlled display case containing a leather-bound volume that hadn't been opened in 7 years. The ledgers weren't physical books, but microfilm hidden within the binding, virtually invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. Lucia's fingers trembled slightly as she extracted the first film, her body blocking Pietro's view as she confirmed what her father had sacrificed everything to protect. "We should go," Pietro urged, his anxiety increasing as Lucia photographed each page with her phone. "Battaglia is expecting us back by noon." His hand moved unconsciously toward his concealed weapon, as 2 men in suits entered the special collections room, their focused gaze immediately locking onto Lucia. The library erupted into chaos as the men drew weapons, Pietro shoving Lucia behind a bookcase as bullets splintered priceless first editions. "Ferraro's men," he hissed, returning fire while pulling her toward a service exit. "They must have followed us from the estate." Blood soaked Pietro's sleeve as they fled down fire stairs, his loyalty now firmly established by the bullets he'd taken defending her. "The warehouse," he gasped, pressing his car keys into her palm. "Battaglia will be waiting at the estate. Ferraro's men will check the hospital next. The warehouse is our only chance." Lucia's mind raced as she drove Pietro's Audi through midday traffic, her phone uploading the ledger images to an encrypted cloud server with each passing mile. The betrayal wasn't Battaglia's alone. The ledgers revealed a conspiracy spanning decades, with her father's testimony merely a calculated move in a larger game between rival families. The warehouse loomed against the waterfront, industrial and anonymous among dozens of similar structures. Pietro's breathing had grown shallow, his complexion gray from blood loss as she helped him from the car. "You should have told me about Ferraro," she accused, supporting his weight as they approached a side entrance. "Didn't know," Pietro managed through clenched teeth. "Old vendetta. Ferraro blamed your father when his son was arrested. Thought the ledgers would clear his name. The truth was always more complicated, more personal than it first appeared. Not just business, but blood, and decades of grievances carried through generations." Voices echoed from within the warehouse, Battaglia's distinctive commanding tone, another man's accented responses, the unmistakable sounds of a major transaction underway. Lucia helped Pietro into the shadow of shipping containers, both of them freezing as Battaglia emerged into the sunlight, accompanied by a distinguished Colombian man and Agent Dawson. now clearly revealed as the crucial link between criminal enterprise and law enforcement protection. The FBI isn't just compromised, they're partners, Lucia whispered, recording the exchange with her phone as Dawson inspected packages being transferred from shipping containers to unmarked vans. The scale of corruption explained her father's desperate measures, his refusal to trust anyone with what he'd discovered. Pietro's hand clutched her wrist with surprising strength for a wounded man. Those ledgers contain offshore account numbers, blackmail material, evidence that would dismantle operations across 3 continents. His eyes held a question, whether she would use this information for justice or leverage in a world where everyone seemed to have a price. Batalia's voice carried across the warehouse yard, issuing instructions for the night's distribution network. Each name he mentioned corresponded to entries in her father's meticulous records, connections that formed a web of influence extending from street corners to penthouse boardrooms. The decision crystallized in Lucia's mind. Not revenge, not money, but escape. With copies of the ledgers secured online, she and her father could disappear permanently, leaving the evidence for authorities beyond Dawson's influence. All they needed was a head start, and enough leverage to keep Batalia's men from following. "Can you walk?" she asked Pietro, calculating their chances if they could reach the car undetected. His grim nod was contradicted by the pallor of his skin, but determination sometimes counted more than physical strength when survival hung in the balance. A shipping container provided temporary shelter as they planned their next move, the voices of Batalia's men growing closer with each passing minute. "I need a distraction," Lucia murmured, eyeing the rows of vehicles parked near the administrative offices. "Something big enough to cover our escape." Pietro withdrew a small detonator from his jacket pocket, managing a pained smile at Lucia's startled expression. "Always have contingencies in our line of work." He handed her the device, nodding toward a fuel tank at the far end of the compound. "That should do it. Wait until I get into position by the east exit." Doubt clouded Lucia's judgment. Pietro had protected her, but his ultimate loyalty remained unclear. Trusting him completely could be as dangerous as facing Battaglia alone, yet her options had narrowed to impossible choices between uncertain allies and confirmed enemies. The explosion rocked the warehouse district, flames erupting toward the afternoon sky as Battaglia's operation descended into chaos. Lucia used the confusion to sprint toward the east exit, heart hammering with the certainty that Pietro had sacrificed himself to secure her escape. Instead, she found him waiting in the driver's seat of an unmarked sedan, engine running. "I hot-wired it," he explained, as she slid into the passenger seat. "They'll be looking for my car." The simple logic of survival had apparently trumped whatever complicated loyalties he juggled. Saint. Mary's hospital was in lockdown when they arrived through the service entrance, Pietro's FBI credentials, stolen from Dawson months earlier as his own insurance policy, granting them access to restricted areas. Adriano Catalano's room was empty, the bed stripped, monitors silent. "Looking for this gentleman?" A nurse appeared in the doorway, her expression professionally neutral as she held out a clipboard. "He was transferred to radiology 20 minutes ago, standard procedure for his treatment protocol." The timing was either miraculous coincidence or evidence that someone else was moving pieces on this chessboard. Lucia found her father in the radiology waiting area, alert and somehow expecting her. In his lap sat a worn leather case containing passports, cash, and documentation she'd never seen before. His trembling hand pressed a note into her palm. "Zurich account. Enough for both treatments. DA is waiting." The hospital's rear exit opened onto a service alley, where a black SUV idled, its driver obscured behind tinted windows. Pietro drew his weapon, positioning himself between Lucia and this new uncertainty, his loyalty now seemingly committed despite the wounds that should have incapacitated him hours ago. The window lowered to reveal District Attorney Christine Wells, her expression grim but determined. "The real FBI has been building a case against Dawson for months," she explained as orderlies helped Adriano into the vehicle. "Your father's evidence was the missing piece. Now get in. We have 10 minutes before Battaglia realizes you're gone." The safe house overlooked the Hudson River, its unassuming exterior concealing state-of-the-art security systems and a medical suite where Adriano could receive continued care. District Attorney Wells spread photographs across the dining table, surveillance of Battaglia, Ferraro, and Dawson spanning 3 years of meticulous investigation. "Your father wasn't the only one gathering evidence," Wells explained, her expression softening as she glanced at Adriano dozing in his wheelchair by the window. "We've had undercover agents in both organizations, but needed concrete financial proof to connect them to the Colombian cartels." Lucia scrolled through her phone, displaying the ledger photographs now securely stored on the DA as encrypted servers. These trace money movements through 17 shell companies across 9 countries, she explained, pointing to account numbers her father had highlighted decades ago. Pietro remained by the door, his gunshot wound professionally dressed, but his position in this new alliance still uncertain. Battaglia will have emptied the warehouse already, he warned, checking his watch. He maintains 3 secondary locations for emergencies: a shipping container yard in Brooklyn, a meat processing plant in Queens, and a private airstrip in New Jersey. Wells nodded, adding these locations to her existing files. We're coordinating with the DEA and uncorrupted FBI units for simultaneous raids tonight, but there's something more personal you both should know. She slid a sealed envelope toward Lucia, the government watermark indicating classified contents. The documents inside ripped away the final veil of lies. Photographs of Adriano with Christine Wells 25 years earlier, both wearing FBI credentials at a crime scene. Not consigliere, but deep cover agent, who had sacrificed everything for an assignment that consumed his life and nearly destroyed his family. My mother, Lucia whispered, the floor seeming to tilt beneath her as decades of careful fiction unraveled. Her father's eyes filled with tears as he reached for her hand, his trembling fingers tracing the outline of her face in a gesture of regret and love that needed no translation. Anna was civilian support staff, assigned to your father's operation, Wells confirmed, her professional demeanor cracking to reveal old grief. When her cover was compromised, she chose to stay rather than abandon the mission. Battaglia's predecessor ordered the hit, thinking she was an informant. The truth crashed through Lucia's consciousness like waves against rock. Her childhood in Italy, her grandmother's protection, the midnight flights from city to city, the whispered conversations that stopped when she entered rooms. Not running from the mafia, but living within it, gathering evidence that would one day bring justice for her mother. The $1 million was never about the ledgers, Pietro interjected, his voice quiet but certain. Battaglia discovered your father's true identity months ago. The elaborate game, the job at Le Ciel, the surveillance. He was testing you to see if you were also an agent. Wells nodded grimly. Battaglia suspected a government operation but couldn't identify all the players. Using you to find the ledgers was secondary to exposing our network. Her gaze shifted to Pietro, a silent question passing between them that confirmed Lucia's growing suspicion about his true allegiance. I've been undercover in Battaglia's organization for 5 years, Pietro confirmed, rolling up his sleeve to reveal a small tattoo identical to one Lucia had glimpsed on Wells's wrist, the covert marking of their specialized joint task force. Your father recruited me personally before his condition deteriorated. Adriano's wheelchair moved closer, his disease-weakened hand clutching a pen to write a shaky message on Wells' notepad. Worth it? The question hung in the air, directed at Lucia, weighted with the sacrifice of her mother's life, her father's health, and her own stolen normalcy. Lucia knelt beside him, suddenly seeing not just her father, but the man who had dedicated his life to a cause greater than himself, greater even than his family. We'll make it worth it, she promised, glancing toward the window where red and blue lights had begun to illuminate the night as tactical teams assembled for the coordinated raids. The secure phone on the table buzzed with an encrypted message. Facial recognition had placed Battaglia at his private airstrip, presumably preparing for escape now that his operation was compromised. Wells immediately began coordinating additional units, the endgame of a decades-long investigation finally unfolding across the city. The private airstrip glowed with runway lights, Battaglia's jet undergoing final preparations as Lucia watched from the tactical van parked behind maintenance buildings. Despite Wells's objections, she had insisted on being present, needing to witness the moment when her parents' sacrifice finally culminated in justice. Stay in the vehicle, Pietro ordered, now dressed in full tactical gear, his injury temporarily forgotten in the adrenaline of the operation. Earpieces crackled with position updates as teams surrounded the airstrip, the coordinated raids across the city having already netted 17 arrests and counting. Battaglia emerged from a black Mercedes, flanked by bodyguards, and, to Lucia's visceral disgust, Agent Dawson, whose betrayal now extended to actively aiding a fugitive's escape. The sight of them walking freely, confidently toward the waiting jet, ignited something primal in her chest, a fury that bypassed rational thought. Before Pietro could stop her, Lucia was out of the van, the cool night air carrying her voice across the tarmac. Giovanni Battaglia! The name rang out, halting the procession as heads turned toward the unexpected interruption. Anna Catalano sends her regards from beyond the grave. Battalia's composure cracked for the first time. Recognition and something like fear flashing across his features as tactical teams used the distraction to advance. Catalano's daughter, he spat, reaching inside his jacket only to freeze as laser sights peppered his chest with red dots. It's over, Giovanni, Lucia continued, walking steadily forward despite Pietro's frantic signals to take cover. The ledgers are with the DA, your accounts are frozen, and your Colombian friends are being arrested as we speak. Each word was a step closer to the man who had orchestrated decades of suffering. Dawson broke first, raising his hands in surrender as reality crashed through his delusions of escape. Several bodyguards followed suit, the odds clearly shifting as tactical teams emerged from shadows, helicopters thundering overhead with spotlights illuminating the scene in harsh white clarity. Only Battaglia maintained his defiance, dark eyes locked on Lucia with murderous intent. You think this ends with me? There are systems in place, connections your father never found. I'll be out in 5 years, and the first thing I'll do is finish what I started with your family. The threat hung in the air between them, a final test of who Lucia truly was. Her father's daughter pursuing justice, or someone willing to cross lines for vengeance. Her hand slipped into her pocket, fingers closing around the small recorder that had captured every word of his confession and threat. You had your chance for a deal, she replied evenly, nodding to Wells, who stepped forward with federal agents. That offer expired the moment you threatened a protected witness in front of the district attorney and a dozen federal agents. Enjoy life without parole, Giovanni. As Battaglia was led away in handcuffs, Dawson attempted one last, desperate negotiation. I have names, he called out to Wells. People you don't even suspect. Connections that go all the way to... His plea cut short as a shot rang out from the darkness beyond the runway, blood blossoming across his chest before tactical teams could react. A figure darted between hangars, disappearing into the night despite pursuit. One of Ferraro's men ensuring Dawson would never reveal the full extent of their operation. The corruption ran deeper than even Lucia's father had documented, tentacles reaching into places they had yet to discover. Pietro appeared at Lucia's side, gently guiding her back toward the tactical van as medical teams rushed to the fallen Dawson. It's never completely over, he murmured, a veteran's wisdom in his voice. But tonight, we've cut off the head. The rest will scatter, fight among themselves, make mistakes. The $1 million that had seemed so crucial days ago now felt meaningless compared to the justice unfolding across the city. Arrests continued through the night, evidence from the ledgers connecting politicians, judges, and business leaders to decades of criminal enterprise. Each indictment another vindication of her father's sacrifice. Dawn broke over the safe house as Lucia returned to find her father awake, alert, watching news coverage of Battaglia's arrest with tears streaming down his weathered cheeks. 25 years of deep cover, the loss of his wife, his health, and nearly his daughter, all culminating in this moment of justice so long deferred. 3 months passed in a whirlwind of grand jury testimonies, protective custody, and medical treatments made possible by the government's Witness Protection Fund. Adriano's condition stabilized under experimental protocols that had once seemed financially impossible, his hands steady enough now to hold a cup without assistance. Lucia stood by the window of their new home, a modest but comfortable house on the outskirts of Portland, overlooking forests instead of concrete. Her testimony had been crucial in securing indictments against 43 members of Battaglia's network, including judges who had dismissed cases against him for decades. Pietro visited occasionally, his cover intact despite the operation's success. His role now focused on dismantling what remained of the organization from within. Each visit brought news of further arrests, assets seized, and connections severed as the criminal empire crumbled without its architect. The doorbell chimed, announcing Christine Wells's monthly check-in, her government vehicle conspicuous in their quiet neighborhood despite attempts at discretion. The Swiss account is fully accessible now, she announced without preamble, placing documents on the kitchen table. Your father's pension and compensation for 25 years of service. Adriano watched from his armchair, more present than he had been in years. The burden of secrets finally lifted from his shoulders. His latest medical scans showed remarkable improvement. The disease's progression slowed by treatments that would never have been possible without the resources now available to them. We've had an interesting development, Wells continued, sliding a newspaper across the table. The obituary of Don Carmine Ferraro, reportedly from natural causes, though the timing seemed suspiciously convenient. His son Marco has reached out through intermediaries, offering information in exchange for limited immunity. Lucia's new position with the Financial Crimes Division gave her unique insight into the complexities of such negotiations. "He wants to leverage his father's death into a fresh start," she observed, recognizing the pattern from dozens of similar cases. "What's he offering?" "Names in 6 European countries, account numbers, and shipping routes we haven't identified yet." Wells tapped her folder thoughtfully. With Battaglia serving consecutive life sentences and Ferraro Sr. gone, Marco sees an opportunity to eliminate competition while protecting himself. The cynical math of justice sometimes required uncomfortable compromises. Lesser criminals freed to capture greater ones. Partial immunity granted to gain critical evidence. Lucia had learned to navigate these gray areas, her idealism tempered but not extinguished by the realities of systemic corruption. Adriano pushed a small box across the table toward his daughter, his message clear without words. Some decisions were hers alone to make now. Inside lay her mother's wedding ring, recovered from evidence storage after 25 years, a tangible connection to the woman who had chosen principle over safety. Accept his offer, Lucia decided, slipping the ring onto her finger, a talisman of her heritage and the values worth fighting for. But maintain surveillance indefinitely. Men like Marco Ferraro don't change their nature. They just adapt their methods. Wells nodded approvingly, the student now demonstrating wisdom that matched her teacher's. Their partnership had evolved from protection to collaboration. Lucia's first-hand experience with Battaglia's organization, providing insights that complemented Wells' prosecutorial expertise. That evening, as Portland's gentle rain tapped against the windows, Lucia prepared dinner in their modest kitchen, a simple act of normalcy that had once seemed impossible. Her father joined her, his movements slow but purposeful as he chopped vegetables, the domestic scene a stark contrast to the life they'd escaped. "Was it worth it?" she asked, echoing his question from months earlier. The cost had been enormous. Her mother's life, her father's health, years of hiding and fear. Yet watching him now, engaged in the simple pleasure of cooking together, she glimpsed the answer in his peaceful expression. "Family dinner at 6, he replied, his voice raspy from disuse but gaining strength with practice. "No burner phones, no coded messages, no looking over our shoulders. Just this." He gestured to their humble kitchen, to the life they were building from the ashes of their past. Worth everything. The $1 million that had once seemed the answer to their problems remained unclaimed. Battaglia's blood money rejected in favor of the harder path. What they had gained instead was beyond price. Truth, justice, and finally, the freedom to simply be father and daughter, without the weight of secrets between them. A text from Pietro interrupted their evening routine. The raids on Marco Ferraro's identified locations had yielded evidence connecting 3 more government officials to the conspiracy. The work continued, ripples expanding from the stone they had cast into dark waters, each wave bringing more truth to light. Lucia stepped onto the porch after dinner, gazing at stars visible here in ways they never had been in New York. The path from waitress to federal analyst had been unimaginable weeks ago, yet somehow felt like returning to a truth that had always been part of her heritage: service, justice, and the courage to stand against corruption regardless of the cost. Thank you all for following this story. If you enjoyed it, please write in the comments where in the world you're watching from, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video, as your support is what keeps me creating these stories for you.